So, what advice would you give to somebody who owns a home, has children, and all that, and means well, but is not willing, is kind of reluctant to have a living trust?
Yeah, okay. The only reason why they're reluctant, the only reason, there's two reasons why we found that people don't take action to get a living trust is one, they don't know anybody they don't know any family or friends, or they haven't asked anybody they know if they've gone to probate. Once they hear one or two or three stories about probate where a family member lost the property, the kids had to move out of the house, the family home had moved out, and they didn't have any money until the court settled the case. Until somebody hears that, they will say it won't happen to me. And all I could say is that there's two things in America that's guaranteed to happen to everybody. One is we're all going to pay taxes, and two, we're all going to die.
Right.
And when that day comes, Uncle Sam's going to want to get his portion. So I always tell people there's already a plan in place, and that's the government's plan. And the government's plan is to decide what happens to your kids and what happens to your things when you're no longer here. A living trust is your own plan. And the government gives us that option to have our own plan to be able to decide on what we want to have happen. I want my child to have this. I want my guardian of my children to do this. I want them to go to the church. I want them to do any. You can have. I've done a comprehensive living trust with, you name it, from the person that had two kids and no money and was almost there, to people that have had millions and millions of dollars. And the comprehensive living trust, they all have the same thing. I only want to do it for my kids. Well, guess what? It's not for you. It's not for you because you'll be gone when the living trust takes an action. Now, here's one thing that many people don't realize of a living trust. A living trust is a living document. It lives forever. It outlives you. So that means that you can make changes, you can add it, you can delete it, you can add people, you can remove people. If somebody passes, we take them off, we do a reinstatement. If you get another child, if your child grows up and they get married, one of the things that we found is that's why every 3 years, that's why our living trust is the only living trust on the market that gives you unlimited updates for life. That means that when if your children are 5 years old today and they live to be 25 and they grow up and they get married and they have kids, you can adjust your living trust to say, I want my home to go to my daughter. And when she passes, I want a portion of that to go to my grandkids so they can go to school. The living trust has that much in there. But if something happens to my daughter, I want the money to be held in the trust, and I want it to go to my grandkids until they're old enough to receive the money, not to my son. There's a funny story about I called it the tattoo son-in-law that didn't get along with his in-laws, but his wife and one of our clients, he had they went on vacation. Mother and daughter went on vacation in Puerto Vallarta, in Mexico, and they passed. They got into an accident and they passed. The dad came, said, "Hey, I need to update my living trust. Can I come in and see you in 2 weeks?" I said, "Fine. Whenever you're here, you get unlimited updates. You can log on." But he said, "I want you to do it for me." His language barrier was not fluent.
Yeah.
And so what happened is he wanted to update the living trust to make sure that if something happens to him, all of his assets go to his daughter's portion of the assets, because it was a brother and sister. He had two kids, and he didn't want the assets to go to the son-in-law. He wanted them to be held in the trust by winter son-in-law, right? And I call the story the tattoo son-in-law. But he wanted the money to go to their grandkids once they grew up, but he wanted to be held in the trust. Well, lo and behold, he didn't make it the 2 weeks and he passed.
Oh.
And the son-in-law ended up inheriting his daughter's portion of of the funds.